Evening, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Why Are You Laughing, a history of comedy podcast. Today, I introduce to you the great Adam Carolla. Carolla, to me, is a very interesting case. Carolla kind of has that sort of loyal following and an interesting place. It's not dissimilar. I've mentioned, it feels like every episode for the last few, about the older guys that, fought in wars and things. And Carolla didn't have a life, anything like that, but he did live a life. Like, he played football. He was like, an All-American football player. He had, construction jobs and all. Well, he was a boxing trainer. We'll get into all of that. But he was like a real guy before he officially got into comedy. And I think that's what's made him relatable to the audience that he's built. But we'll start with his very early days. So we will go to his appearance on the Are You Garbage podcast, which talks about basically growing up and his education.
And how were you in school? Did you do good in school?
No, I didn't do well. I didn't learn to read or write, early in my, whatever those formative years are.
What's early? What are we talking about here?
Whenever you're supposed to, whatever that is.
When did you learn to read?
Ostensibly when I got into show business.
Really?
Yeah.
What are you, Sling Blade? What the fuck?
Shit.
Holy shit.
Yeah, we had
Now
to
you wrote a
French
book?
fries.
The fuck? You're writing books?
Yeah. It's
That's
quite
fucking crazy.
Well, I went, I missed out on traditional school from 0 to about the 5th grade is when I entered like a conventional.
Is this
public
because the mom
school.
was hippie-ish?
Yeah, my mom was hippie-ish.
Okay.
And so it was kind of a hang back, free to be you and me, kind of communal, like went to school in the house.
I would have never pegged you for any of this.
Did nothing. Well, my dad was from Philly and, sort of straight, normal or whatever. My mom was kind of California hippie. Mm-hmm. And so we ended up in this community school, like, it's just someone's house in Silver Lake. And we just threw dirt clods and made stuff out of clay. There was no learning. There was no books. There's no anything.
No curriculum,
and then at some point that just kind of all dried up. And I ended up just going across the street to Colfax Elementary. It was just a regular.
Your mom put you in school.
Yeah. She put me in the one I could walk to, And so I entered in the 5th grade and I didn't know anything. I was like a Crocodile Dundee walking through Manhattan.
I'd never heard that. And I know a lot of people, I've heard a lot of people that have listened to Carolla religiously say now in 2023, it's a lot of the same stories that you hear over and over again. So I'm sure if you listen to his radio show or his podcast, you've heard that story a bunch. But I was not aware of that. And you completely wouldn't expect, if you know anything about him, that he grew up as like some sort of hippy dippy, whatever you learn, your grades are dolphins and stars instead of letters.
Yeah, exactly.
Again, if you ever heard him talk about his childhood, he has a lot of resentment towards his parents. And when I listened to him on Marin, he was basically saying like, people ask me like, were you abused? And I say like, abused would have been some form of attention. I got none. It was just like, I could do whatever I wanted because essentially I didn't exist to my parents.
That's brutal. I loved his Crocodile Dundee reference too.
It was perfect. Yeah. But sometimes that's just, everyone has their own thing where it's like you got too much attention, you got not enough, nothing's ever good enough for any kid is what you learn if you go to one therapy session, pretty much. I couldn't read any. I couldn't read technically because of my vision. I did the reading and just guess at everything. Essentially, we were looking at the same piece of paper where neither of us could read it for different reasons. And he talks a little about his football career here.
I wasn't really much of a partier. I wasn't a troublemaker. I was just kind of kept my head down, played football.
Okay.
Like sports.
What position?
Good at something. I played linebacker and guard as well on the offensive side. And I was good. Like I got all Bally and
there you go.
Some scholarships, but
I just want to apologize because I believe I called him an All-American earlier. It's much different.
I could have maybe
Even Alabama wouldn't take it.
I was not being recruited by Alabama. I was, UC Davis or Cal Poly Pomona, places
Holy
like that.
shit.
That's wild, man.
Marshall, actually.
Really? There you go.
But that was... a short period of time after the plane crash, and the entire team was decimated. They needed human beings.
They just needed bodies. If you can walk, come to Marshall. I think one of the reasons I'm drawn to a lot of comedians is their perspective on things, because Adam's a guy who bitches all the time about his parents. He tells one story where he has two shows. He has Crank Yankers and The Man Show, both on Comedy Central at the same time. The family had gotten together for some occasion, and his mom just got something in the mail about upgrading, like from the cable company, saying she should upgrade to cable. And he said his mother, in all earnestness, says, "Can anyone think of a reason why I should get cable?" And Adam's like, "I have two shows. I can think of two." This is basically how he entered the workforce.
I got out of high school. I decided not to go to college, not because I wasn't highly sought after as a student. When you pull a 1.75 GPA at North Hollywood High, you have every place from Stanford to Yale, vying for your attention. But sensibly, I decided to go to a construction site and pick up garbage and dig ditches. Instead, I realized pretty quickly this is going to be a horrible life, so I bought some tools and a hypoid saw.
Yeah, so he was, he had a real man's job, and he would do shit like that. It took him a lot of years. He was very persistent. And that's the interesting thing, is the best training for radio is listening to and understanding radio. Just like morning DJs and shit like that. 80s and 90s, you listen to Howard Stern and shit like that. In a weird way, that's the best training, because you start to understand how conversation flows and timing and things like that. I think that's the sort of thing that allowed him to be good at improv, and then his improv training in turn allowed him to be good in radio. He did start stand-up as well at that time. Like, he would do open mics and stuff. And then I think when he started to blow up, kind of just abandoned stand-up until he went back to it, years later without any sort of an act. We're at the him meeting Kimmel, right? But this is the story of how they actually met.
I got into comedy because I was working as a boxing instructor.
Boxing instructor. Adam Carolla can fight. I could box. And that's what I used to do for a living. And when I was doing it, I was listening to the radio one day, and they're having one of those morning show boxing matches where they're like, the sports guy, who was Jimmy Kimmel, is going to be fighting the maintenance guy, Michael the maintenance man. And we need trainers, and we need equipment, and we need everything. I was just driving my truck, and I was like, oh man, I got to get in on this. Because I wanted to check out radio, because I always wanted to do radio. So I just drove over to the radio station, and I just banged on the door, and I said, I'm a boxing trainer. And they said, well, hold on. And I just stood out there in the hallway, and at some point, Jimmy came out, and he said, what's up? I said, I'm a boxing instructor. He said, when do you want to start? I said, let's get started today. And we got started, and I made friends with him. He lost the fight. He was no good at boxing. All we did was sit around and drink Snapple and talk about comedy. But by the end of the 3 weeks I had to train him, he was like, you're funny, and he got me onto the radio.
I thought the end was the whole story, where Jimmy Kimmel ran into him and said, oh, geez, you're funny. You should, come on the show or something. But I didn't realize how persistent Adam was in that endeavor, because he's so connected to Jimmy Kimmel. Like, the way that he came up is in large part through opportunities that Jimmy Kimmel helped present him, basically. You can tell Carolla still loves and respects Kimmel, but they've certainly drifted apart, because I think Kimmel in a lot of ways has changed even more than Stern has.
Oh yeah.
Over the years. But he's not afraid to talk about Adam, say he loves Adam, whatever. He'll say, I disagree with him on the dreaded virus or something. But, he still acknowledges that they are friends, which at least leaves me some ounce of respect for Kimmel.
Right.
The story isn't just that Kimmel put him on the radio and all of a sudden Adam was a star. Kimmel's saying, the best way for you to get on is to develop call in as a character or something. Become a regular caller. Kevin and Bean is the show that they were on. Legendary talk show in Los Los Angeles. Jimmy was the sports guy. He's like, listen, call in as a character. I'll make sure you get on, but I'm not going to tell them, hey, this is my buddy Adam, because it's going to be unfairly judged. Carolla would start calling in as this Mr. Burcham character, who was like a woodshop teacher who couldn't relate to the modern day kids. So basically it was Adam Carolla. And that caused Adam to kind of have a place in that world. And then him and Kimmel started working together more, and that partnership developed. I forget, Loveline was a radio show first. Most people know Loveline as the weekly MTV show. Dr. Drew was a physician. They will have you answer these sex and relationship questions. But very wisely, someone said, well, there's got to be someone with him. This was the idea that Dr. Drew had.
You were doing that character, and I thought it was hysterical. And they actually gave you a shift on Saturdays, right?
Yes. And
I used to time my nursing home rounds with his breaks, so I could hear Burcham talking to some of these young callers, because it was pretty funny. Some TV producers showed up and announced they were going to do a show, and they were just going to do it. Whoever wanted to come along, go ahead. And I was like, all right, interesting. And Ricky said no. And they went, who co-host now? I had no idea. And I was out running one day. I could show you the spot I was in. I thought of Adam. I thought, what if that guy that does Burcham? I bet that guy
He
can
had like
do
a
this.
vision of you while jogging through Pasadena.
Yeah, so Dr. Drew just heard something in Carolla. Like, he liked his weekend show and would hear him on Kevin and Bean. And he's like, maybe this guy would fit well with me. I think he's funny. So literally just being a call, that's something that's gone now. That'll never happen. No. Just a caller to terrestrial radio, getting a career like Adam Carolla's, like that's not going to happen.
Never again.
Let's go to Howard, just because, like I said, we'll have to backtrack a little for this. But Carolla had Artie on, and this is something I had always heard, but didn't quite know the full story. So when Jackie Martling left the Howard Stern show, they had auditions for the Jackie chair, basically, and names that I've always, obviously Artie Lang, and then you'll hear other names thrown out there like Gilbert, Joe Rogan, Jim Florentine, Bob Levy, as people auditioning for that spot. And two that I always heard were Kimmel and Carolla. I didn't know how serious that was, but this is Adam and Artie talking about it. And Artie kind of starts this conversation by saying, well, basically, I only had this job because you turned it down. And Carolla explains what went into that.
I don't think Howard knew who I was, quite honestly. He
probably didn't.
He probably didn't.
Yeah.
So Jimmy and I came on the show, and I think he liked Jimmy a lot, but I think he loved me.
Yeah, no. In the beginning, you were he loved you, and you were great on the show, and you knew how to do radio.
And so he was like, well, just move to New York and do the show. And I was like, I have 3 jobs in L.A. and 2 houses. I can't just move. Because when you haven't heard of somebody, you assume that they're not doing anything, and Howard's the biggest name in radio.
Yes.
So come on out to the biggest market in the country and hang out for 4 hours and get paid and do the show.
What's the
main difference there was Artie was doing nothing. When he got offered the job for Stern, the Norm show just got canceled. And so Artie was kind of between gigs looking for something to do, and the Stern show thing opened up. I think Artie's a lot better fit in that particular role.
1,000%.
Because, like I said, Carolla's not necessarily a great listener. Now, Artie's a talker, too. If you ever heard Artie do a show by himself, he can ramble. But I think he was... Now, it's hard to say because Carolla wasn't in that spot. We never heard him do that. But Artie just seems better suited for a guy who could play second fiddle, where Carolla is much more of a talker, and it feels like would have dominated the conversation at times, which I don't think Howard wanted. Although it seems like obviously they had some sort of chemistry if Howard liked him enough to even mention it. It'd be wild if Carolla was there now.
Yeah.
with Howard being a hermit. But yeah, that would have been interesting, but it was never really... I thought those guys were in a lot, but they were both Stern fans and trying to get on the show. And I don't think they were ever on until they had the Man Show.
Right.
So that's what I found interesting. I thought they were kind of regulars on there, but Carolla saying basically he turned it down because he had other shit going on. He had Loveline, he had multiple television shows. He's like, I'll just wait for you to leave and I'll replace you. But anyway, shout out to Adam Carolla. I'm sure we missed a lot. As I always say, particularly with these living guys, let me know whatever I missed, and if there's enough, maybe we'll do a part 2 someday. But I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope I did Adam Carolla justice. And we'll get back with you guys next week.